Well, hello and welcome back to Communist Radio. I'm here today with Fiona Lammy, who's just got back from a protest in support of kneecap, and we're going to be talking about where the Palestine movement is going, because there's definitely been an uptick in the Palestine movement over the last month or so. We were out together at the Nakba 77 demonstration. 500,000 people came out onto the streets of London. It was absolutely incredible. We've also seen lots of emergency demonstrations outside Downing Street. Must be pretty much every night at this point, right? When the Freedom Flotilla was abducted, there was a big protest then. There's been big protests because of the Iran-Israel war that's been going on.
Yeah.
And as I said at the beginning, you were out supporting kneecap today. How was that?
Yeah. No, the kneecap protest was great. When the boys arrived, there was a lot of us there. There were hundreds of people. And we should say on a Wednesday at 9:00 in the morning.
Yes.
And they came out to huge cheers. And as you say, the mood is quite strong because there is this sort of generalized momentum, I think, in the movement at the moment. At that Nakba protest, 500,000 people. And I think that there's sometimes when there's loads of activity can feel a bit disorientating or a bit exhausting. But actually the last couple of weeks have felt the opposite. It's been things building upon one another. And particularly with this kneecap thing, I think part of the reason why it's got such a big turnout and response is because it's very rare to have people like the guys in kneecap who are just 100% willing to stick it to the British establishment. And I heard that Liam was asking for, Gaelic translation in the hearing as well, which is amazing. And so I think that's quite a rare thing to have anyone with a platform just 100% saying it how it is. And that gives confidence into the movement. And then people come out. And I guess, in a certain degree, that's also what people are seeing with the Freedom Flotilla, right?
Yes.
That these people are willing to risk their lives to get to Gaza. I saw one of the people on the boat, Rima, I can't remember her surname now, but when she returned back to Paris, tens of thousands of people were out supporting her. I mean, it is this kind of, there's clearly an uptick, a surge, this sense that maybe we're on the verge of something.
Yeah, and I think now's the time really to go on the offensive on this question.
Yeah.
Because for the months preceding this last one, I think a lot of people have been asking where next for the Palestine movement.
Yeah.
Because 20 months on, very little has changed apart from the situation has grown worse. In fact, the mask has slipped and the halo has really been stripped off the head of all the Western imperialists, of all their institutions. And people now are so angry. And I feel like that anger was being suppressed down for a long time when the protests began to wane on the streets of London, where it wasn't hundreds of thousands of people coming out every week. But now all of a sudden that's changed. And I guess people will be asking, well, what has changed, right?
Yeah, 100%. There is a lot of anger and also this sense that suddenly in the news, actually you see Gaza a lot in the mainstream news, which was not the case 6 months ago or, even longer. But now, I was watching Channel 4 News the other day and seeing, Christian Guru Murthy really giving quite an aggressive interview to an Israeli spokesperson, saying, no, but it's not true what you're saying. And, you're stopping people getting food, you're stopping people getting aid. And you just think, where's this come from?
And where was this for the last 19 months before as well?
Well, that's the point. That's why it's a kind of false, sudden or faux concern that they're showing. But clearly something has changed in the mainstream media. And it's now much more acceptable to say maybe Israel has gone too far. Yes. Even Tory MPs in Parliament have been saying Israel has gone too far. And I say this as a lifelong defender of Israel. But now Israel has gone too far, and that there is a feedback loop taking place, because on the one hand, some people are like, well, finally, people are talking about this in the media and parliament, so on and so forth. But there's also deep anger where it's like, well, how dare you say this now when we have been saying this for so long?
That's so true.
And have been ignored, not just ignored, but criminalized even. I think a lot of, I mean, obviously I was at this kneecap protest today, but there's a lot of solidarity protests at the moment for people who are imprisoned, whether it's the Filton 18, you know, there's the SOAS 2, there's a lot of different activists on trial where there's terror charges have been used. And now suddenly Channel 4 and Parliament, Tory MPs are all saying, oh, Israel's gone too far. So that enrages people.
Absolutely.
As well.
And I remember being a little bit shocked last month in May when there was editorial after editorial calling out the genocide, and in some cases even using the word. I remember The Guardian refusing to use the word for a very, very long time. Of course, the Labour Party still chooses not to use the word at present. But it felt like this moral panic had all of a sudden kind of had this cascading effect over the country, where you saw, for instance, in like The Independent, was saying, the world needs to wake up. And that frustrated me. Of course. I can't say the word I want to say. It frustrated me a lot because the world has been wide awake whilst all of this is taking place. And we've even seen David Lammy come out and say to Israel, history will judge you. I mean, those are some very nice words. But of course, history is judging Israel and is judging British imperialism for aiding and abetting this genocide.
Yeah, well, exactly. I mean, we have said for a long time that the Palestine movement, particularly in the West, amongst young people, has become this lightning rod for all the accumulated anger against the status quo. How dare you facilitate a genocide whilst at the same time make cuts that are making life worse for all of us here? And that was even present in the encampments, when the encampments first started, all of that anger. And now David Lammy, the audacity to come out after endless gaslighting and statements and ignoring people, to now have this kind of veneer of care or anything, is so enraging. The hypocrisy around it it's nauseating, and at the end of the day, it's still just words. They can put out as many strong words as they like. It makes no difference when they're still continuing selling arms, and continuing in particular the F-35 fighter jets, the parts for that that are made in Britain. They're still allowing that to flow and doing other things which we can talk about to help protect Israel. And so it's like, how dare you, David Lammy? And I have, like, David Lammy, I remember when he went to the UN and said, you know, I sit here as a black man, and as a black man, I know imperialism when I see it. And then he just spoke about Russia. And it's like, it's hard to find the words to describe the cynicism of people like this, whilst at the same time shaking hands with the Trump or at the time it was Biden and Netanyahu himself. It's revolting. But these people are just cynical, robotic politicians that just, play the role they need to play to protect British imperialist interests. But every single time he speaks, he guarantees more people want to come out and protest, I think.
Absolutely. Like, get the words, the children of Gaza out of your mouth. That was my immediate response when he delivered this statement. And then it was leaked just a couple hours later that there was a reconnaissance mission, a spy plane from the Cyprus base, where intelligence is being gathered for Israel's operations in Gaza. So that continued as he was saying all of these highfalutin words and trying to, I think, create the appearance of distancing himself from the Netanyahu regime. Why? Is it because he has woken up? Is it because he has grown a conscience? No, it's because Netanyahu has become a total strategic liability within the region.
Exactly.
And I think it's so cynical and disgusting how these people have kind of held the line for so long. They wait for Donald Trump of all people to sideline Netanyahu,
Yes.
for all of a sudden them to find their voice, right?
Yeah.
But all of them sudden they start saying, well, the Israeli cabinet are talking about eliminating everyone, and that's really questionable.
Yeah.
They don't say it's a genocide, but that's really questionable. The Israeli cabinet have been saying that for the
From
last
the start.
22 months.
Yeah.
From the very beginning, and at the very beginning, it was Sir Keir Starmer who said it's proportionate to cut off aid, power, electricity into the Gaza Strip. From the beginning, it was David Lammy that said it could be legally justified.
Yeah, to bomb camps.
Yes, to bomb camps.
To bomb camps.
Aid camps where people are fleeing for their lives.
Yeah.
Where they are told by the Israelis, go here or you will be killed.
Exactly.
Or only for them to meet certain death there. And I think the reality really has been shown in the last 5 days or so. We're shooting this on a Wednesday. But after the assault that Israel carried out on Iran, we all of a sudden saw the old script brought back, right?
Yeah, so quickly.
Self-defense.
Yeah.
That was untenable before, but now Israel is attacking and provoking and looking to spread its war.
Yes.
Oh, it's all for self-defense. Preemptive strike is what they said. And they've been saying this for 30 years now.
Yeah.
Iran is just months away, just years away.
Yeah, it's about to happen.
It's about to happen.
Yeah.
And of course, we're back to square one with the government. And it shows when the chips are down, they're of course going to come to the beck and call of their friend in the Middle East.
Yeah, I mean, just to talk about the Labour government for a moment, Keir Starmer and David Lammy presented themselves when they're on their quest to get, take power as the sensible ones, and we're going to sort everything out, and it's the Tories that are mad or whatever. These people are warmongers. And actually, there was a report that came out which showed that the Labour government, their first 3 months in power, they licensed more sales to Israel than the Tories had done in the previous year. Yeah. In the first 3 months. And as you say, all of those statements they said, making it crystal clear that what Israel's doing was legally justifiable and it's fine, it's right. And now they're saying, oh, no, but I think it's gone too far. Everything that Netanyahu's doing is the logical conclusion of Western imperialism, of which America is a key component part, but Britain plays a role as well, allowing them to do it and making all of these statements in defense of them. And so, of course, they're going to go ahead whilst you supply the weapons, and not just the weapons, but the political justification again and again and again. So this latest attack on Iran is the result of what the Labour government has been saying and doing for the last year. And to try and distance them, well, they're not trying to distance themselves. They're kind of, we want de-escalation, but at the same time, we are completely in defense of Israel's right.
And we'll send military assets to the region.
And we'll give you some jets.
Yes.
I mean, it's farcical, but it's just cynical. But it's the position they found themselves in. As you say, they just kind of wait for what Trump does.
Yes.
There was this really funny picture, did you see, of Keir Starmer where he's dropped some piece of paper in front of Donald Trump and he's like kneeling over trying to pick it up. And people online were saying this is the perfect, symbol of the special relationship, which is Starmer like literally on his knees picking these sheets of paper up. And Donald Trump, is just looking down on him like, what the hell is going on? I mean, it's just ridiculous. And there's a lot of anger over this latest attack.
Absolutely.
And I think we'll see people talking about it at the demonstration on Saturday.
Yes.
A lot.
Yeah, which is due to be huge, and we will be going along. The Revolutionary Communist Party will be there. And just on this point about words not really mattering, I think there was quite an instinctive response to Labour's statement, and that was, this changes no facts on the ground. And as you said, it's been released since that point, the arms exports to Israel. It's also been released in the press since that point that IDF personnel are trained in Britain. Trained in Britain.
Yeah.
So it's not just spying and arming the Israeli state.
Yeah.
It's literally training up the death squads that are going into Gaza. And I think all of this feeds into what you were saying at the beginning, that there is a huge amount of radicalization around this question. Mm-hmm. I think maybe we should comment on that a little bit, because it's certainly true that the government's position hasn't changed. Even in words, they're back to the old script. But I think something has fundamentally changed amongst young people. It's become this issue of a generation.
Yeah, definitely the defining issue in so many ways. As you say, the protests are huge at the moment, and that's after a time when it felt like maybe they were getting smaller. Maybe it's also because it's summer and these things. But the point is, there's a real appetite to go beyond what has been happening for the last year and a half. And even today, like at the kneecap demonstration, I was talking to people and they were going, yeah, this is great. We need to do more. Yes. We need to do more is the automatic end to every sentence, every catch up that you have at any Palestine event. It's what are we doing next? Because we're not here to feel good about ourselves. We're here because we actually want to do something. And you've seen that a lot. I mean, this week, I think, as you said at the start, there's also been some protests outside of different arms factories. This was yesterday, actually. There was 3 key places that they were targeting. And this was organised by the Palestine Solidarity Campaign. And they got big numbers. They got big numbers out to go to these arms factories. During the working day. Because people want to target the war machine. They aren't, because they don't buy into what David Lammy and all these people are saying. They're like, we don't trust you. We want to do something ourselves because we can't wait around to see if in another 6 months you'll do something else, suspend another 8% of arms sales or whatever he did before, which was ridiculous. So people are going with the explicit reason that they want to shut down the arms factories, which is very good. But I think at these actual protests themselves, I think maybe at one of them they were able, to actually close the factory for the day. But I was talking to someone actually at the demonstration this morning who was saying that actually the protest they had was kind of just off to the side. It started just after the working day in the factory began and ended just before the workers were going to leave. So they didn't actually engage with any workers and they didn't actually stop the factory from operating that day, which, isn't really what people are there for.
That's right. And what you said there about whenever you're catching up with people that in the Palestine movement, whenever you're on a demonstration, a protest, local action, what next is on people's minds, right? I think that is really important. And I think that's kind of been the story of the movement up until the present day, right? We have seen so many different outlets, this anger around this issue has been channeled into. We've seen, for instance, very recently in London, Youth Demand aiming to shut down the streets of London in order to bring attention to the genocide and to the government's complicity and active participation, we should add, to the genocide in Gaza.
Yeah, because we should say that although, in the media and in Parliament, they're talking more, it's from this very, isn't it awful that children are dying?
Yes.
Of course, children have been dying from day one.
Yes.
What's more important, or equally important, rather, I should say, is to point out who is killing them and how are they able to do that, which obviously Channel 4 News is not doing in the same way that we are.
No, of course. And also we've seen Palestine Action take matters quite literally into their own hands by smashing up arms factories, hitting the bosses where it hurts. We've seen so many different forms of activism take place, not least the encampment movement, which was an international phenomenon. This was absolutely huge, inspired of course off the back of what was taking place at Columbia University, where I would say the more successful encampment movements in Britain, and there was about 25, 30, something like that. The best ones sought to actually escalate the struggle, not simply through stunts, but actually through linking up with the organised working class on campus as their first line of defence, right, from the attacks from management and their attempts to pit the students against one another. And we also saw it really kind of become reference points in different areas. We were very involved in the Queen Mary encampment that took place, where after leafleting outside hospitals, outside work depots, people would come along in the evenings with their kids, right, to come and celebrate the bravery and the courage of the students that were being victimized, were being harassed by other students on campus. And it really, I think, showed that people were looking to take harder action. Which is very significant because for the last 20 years, Palestine Solidarity Campaign has been around, BDS as a strategy has been around But generally speaking, it's been within this framework of we are here just to raise awareness, right? And it's been consumerist, individualist action plans that they've come up with, targeting basically goods that come from Israeli settlements and this kind of thing. And I think in the last 20 months, what has really transformed the Palestine movement is this idea that we need to go beyond that. That is not enough in and of itself. What we actually need is to start talking about the real causes of the bloodshed in Gaza, the brutalization of the Kurds, what is taking place in Syria. And it has a name. You were saying it at the protest just last weekend. Its name is imperialism, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's really a key point of, it's hard now to speak to anyone without them saying, we don't trust the government. We don't trust the imperialists. We understand that they created this mess in the first place and they're responsible for the bloodshed that have happened ever since.
Yeah.
That is significant, I think.
Yeah. Like the point is, what we're saying is that the mood to really connect this movement and take it beyond where it is there. People are yearning. They are crying out for it. They are willing. There are people who are willing. There are people who are willing to risk jail, to risk whatever it is, in order to take things further. And if that could be organized on a serious basis, in conjunction, most importantly, with the working class, then we could start to make serious actual dents into the war machine. And obviously, we're not opposed to protests at all. It does feel amazing when you're on a protest and there's 500,000. It's like a physical manifestation. It's a message to the BBC, to Keir Starmer. We know, in our thousands, in our millions, we're Palestinians. We know that the majority of people support us and see through the lies. And that's also significant. I mean, the propaganda and the lies that they have promoted for so long, and so many people are able to cut through it. That is a useful thing, but it's, as you say, it's so clearly not enough. And there is so much anger at austerity. There's so much anger that exists right now in Britain. It reminds me in September and October last year, I went on this Books Not Bombs tour of different universities making this argument. And everywhere I went, everyone more or less agreed, which was useful, that what's next for the Palestine movement is a program that essentially goes beyond Palestine, not because it will dilute it, not because it will weaken it, but because it will make it concrete in the interests of the working class in Britain against austerity and British imperialism's role. And once you do that, of course we can win people over, and then we can organize them. That is where we think, the leadership of the Palestine movement needs to go. And what you have is situations like this week where the Palestine Solidarity Campaign organizes a protest. And then from the reports I got, you've got some people in it who then want to go block a road and so on and so forth, and others who don't. And it creates this weird disjointed tension, because I think the leadership find themselves in a position where they're at the head of a movement that's bigger than them. And has gone beyond their politics, and they're struggling to contain it. Yeah,
I think that's the essential point, that the thing that has hamstrung the Palestine movement has been, it's like the ideas at the head of it, the self-appointed leadership at the head of it, that are liberal pacifists. They oppose war, as of course everyone in the movement does. But they oppose it in a completely different way to the way that we oppose war. We don't think that wars are simply caused by nasty, twisted individuals. Of course that is the case. When you look around the world today, it's you can take your pick at the nasty, twisted individuals out there. And of course Netanyahu is one of those. But what lies behind Netanyahu? It's Zionism. What is Zionism to the West? It's their bridgehead into the Middle East. It's the Zionist state has acted as the attack dog of US imperialism. It's acted as its watchguard. Its enemies have often aligned with the United States. And of course, Britain basically does what its master tells it in Washington. So what we're talking about here is something much bigger than individuals, right? And we think that wars are an inevitable product of the capitalist system. And so you can't appeal to the morality of David Lammy or Keir Starmer. because they have a completely different set of class interests. This is the fundamental point. If there was a class morality that these peoples embody, it's one of money and markets mattering more than lives, right?
Yeah.
Profits and prestige on the world stage, this is what matters to them. And so people have moved beyond that type of politics about appealing simply to the Labour government to do better. That's very significant. And I would also say, I agree absolutely with what you said about protests being, of course, it's a massive symbol when millions of people come out coordinated across the country, but it's not enough. That's what people are saying. That's what people have been saying, actually, not in the last month. They've been saying
ages.
They've been saying it since November 2023, actually. What is the next step? And what we would say is that the thing that has been lacking has been the working class playing an independent role within the struggle, a lack of a class-based program, perspective, and strategy. And I think those are the key things. Why? Because our perspective is one that wars will be made inevitable again and again. Flare-ups, bombardments. This is part and parcel of having a racist ethnic state in the Middle East that believes it can deal with total impunity, right?
Yeah.
Why does it believe that? Because of Western imperialism. So there is going to be no peace in the Middle East as long as the Zionist state remains, as long as the region is ruled by Arab despots that are responsible for the plight of the Palestinians.
Yeah.
Okay, if that's your perspective, what's your program? We cannot trust them.
Yeah.
We can't trust al-Sisi in Egypt. We can't trust Lammy and Starmer in Britain. We can't trust Trump in the United States. The only friend of the Palestinian people is the working class of the world. And people's hearts do bleed for Palestine.
Absolutely.
Everywhere. Of course, it's become a major issue in the West, but in the Arab world, it's a great deal of shame for many Arab people to see what's happening and to see the complicity of their governments.
I saw an amazing chant the other day. I can't even remember where it was. Maybe it was an old one. I don't know if they're in a football stadium or something, but the translation of what they were saying is like shouting at their government saying, we want to go and fight to free Gaza. We want to go and like, shame on you, let us go and help the Palestinians, but you won't. I wouldn't be surprised if that was in Egypt, actually.
Yeah, or Jordan. It's I think, a widespread sentiment at this stage. And it's on that basis that we understand what tactics and what strategy would work.
Yeah.
I mean, it's very good that protests are taking place outside arms factories, but it felt a little bit performative what PSC were putting on yesterday. What I mean by that is they have received a lot of flack for basically limiting the movement, not moving beyond protests from A to B.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people have looked at what Palestine Action have been doing and saying, well, this is more effective.
Yeah.
And responding to that, they say, okay, we're going to get together outside the arms factories now. But what we need is a systematic campaign to reach the workers within those factories and convince them to down their tools, right? That another society is possible, that we can repurpose their factories, and instead of it being weapons that will end up in some genocidal war elsewhere in the world, that in fact their skills and the technique that they've learned can be used to society's good. That's the kind of socialist program we need to be connecting with people on. And I would say, as a leadership, as a self-appointed leadership that commands the authority of millions of people, why are we not going down to the docks and agitating there? We've seen recently that the French dock workers have come out basically and refused to service a ship destined for Israel. We've seen that all across actually the world, little pockets of international working class solidarity, workers' boycotts, which if you go back to October 2023, that's what the Palestinian trade unions were calling for. They were asking for the working class to basically down its tools and prove through its strength, through the role it plays in production, that it can grind the war machine to a halt.
Yeah.
Where has that been from the strategy?
Yeah. If we're going to have a protest outside of an arms factory, as a bare minimum, do it so that you can talk to the workers as they're going in. Don't avoid them entirely. And in fact, if you are avoiding them entirely, my question is why? Do you not believe that they can be convinced fundamentally? And if you think that is the case, then what is the purpose of our movement at all?
Yes.
What is the purpose of raising awareness continually for 20 years or for the last 2 years if you don't actually think that we can convince workers in Britain to come over onto the side of the Palestinians in a material way and not participate in the building of those manufacturers? And we've had reports before that actually in some of these places people are disgusted. You know, there is a mood actually in some of these arms factories of they don't want to be a part of this at all. And this is where the role of the unions comes in, of course, because if we know that, one, there's a huge movement in general that wants to stop this, there's even an appetite for it inside of the factories, then the only thing that is missing is the right leadership and the right organization to say, this is how we're going to do it. And that is where, we have to say about the unions. I mean, at Palestine demonstrations, you'll always see union flags. Great, fine. But the leadership of the unions are not really doing anything beyond lip service. And some of them aren't even giving lip service, in the case of Sharon Graham and Unite, to what's happening in the arms factories and actually organising those workers.
Yeah, they have acted as a massive impediment on the growth of this movement. And not just the numerical growth, but the kind of action that workers could take, right? When you look at how many millions of people are organised in this country, something like 6-7 million workers. In Unite, for instance, you have, of course, people that transport certain components for weapons. You have the organisation of people on the docks as well. And there has been not a peep from the union leadership. You know, if they were to lift their finger all of a sudden, I think you would not only see those workers come out on strike, you would see a massive scramble to join the union in order to actually join in the actions that can stop the war machine and bring it to a halt.
And can you imagine the public support for such a strike? Would be phenomenal.
Absolutely. I mean, we have lots of worker comrades in the RCP, and many of them have felt completely blocked within their workplace.
Yes.
Around even discussing the question. There's a comrade in my old branch who works for a law firm, and the chance of even discussing the issue of Palestine is something that management were trying to monitor very, very closely, and discouraging bringing in external speakers and this sort of thing. And I think that kind of pressure that the workers feel, the way to unleash that is through a militant lead being given. And it's not as if there aren't plenty of examples of workers' boycotts taking place in this country, right? The working class showing that it doesn't want war, it doesn't want genocide, it doesn't want illegal invasions and imperialist meddling. You can point back to the example of the Rolls-Royce workers in Glasgow that refused to service jet engines that were destined for Pinochet's junta in Chile. We've seen many different examples of this. And I think this is the point. When we say that the working class has no interest in imperialist war, we mean it. And you can tell that when you speak to working class people. And if that were to be unleashed, if that was to be harnessed, the anger that really exists, we could see a very effective campaign waged for hands to be taken off Gaza, right? For Britain to be shut down and the streets to be shut down as a result.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, when I talk to people in the Palestine movement about these things, you start talking in these ways, you can see people start to, like, their eyes light up. They're like, yeah, that makes sense, right? And that is just what people are yearning out for, is for some kind of direction, some kind of answers to be given. We will be at this national demonstration on Saturday, for example, which I think will be huge. But we aren't going there just to, wave our flags and chant. We're going there to talk to people about these ideas, about the way we think things need to go, because we don't want to be here in another year. Not that Gaza has another year, but we don't want to be here saying the same things on these same protests, because this uptick that we're in makes people feel good, but no uptick can last forever, right? As you say, the class struggle goes through ups and downs and goes through waves, and it's not a kind of permanent state of just enthusiasm or momentum that people will have. The demoralization will hit in again, and there's no guarantee that things will come back. So you've got to strike while the iron is hot, right? And okay, great. PSC thought, let's go to the factories this week. Okay, next week, let's go back with a better plan to actually reach those workers.
Yes, yeah, I think that's a really important point. And as you said a little bit earlier on, linking the wars abroad to the war against the poor at home has to be the program, right?
Yes.
This is something that I feel like there is some confusion on within the Palestine movement. Sometimes people want to kind of keep Palestine kind of siloed off from everything else. But in fact, when you look at the anger behind Palestine, of course, it's the suffering of the children, it's the bombing of the camps, and so on and so forth. But it's also the deep, immense anger that people feel that this is being carried out in their name, and this rise in militarism that's taking place all across the globe at the moment is being used as a justification for attacking working class people at home, for basically saying to the youth, you have no future, saying to the disabled, sorry, we can't afford to pay anything, and actually we're going to harass you and target you and make you feel like you're frauds. For saying to the elderly, you're going to freeze to death because we're not going to pay this allowance anymore. I think connecting this into a holistic program which seeks to transform society, to say we have no trust in those at the top, to bring about anything but a rotten peace, which is not the same as Palestinian liberation. We have no trust in those at the top to actually provide a future worth living for our class in this country. And therefore, the questions have to be interlinked. In order to consistently fight for Palestine or any oppressed people, you have to be anti-capitalist, you have to be anti-imperialist.
Yeah. I mean, what do we want? We want a mass movement that brings down the Labour government, that brings down with the war criminals. And the way in which that's going to take place is if we are, fighting not just them as individuals, but the system that they represent, which is producing misery in this country. And that is the basis for an entire mass movement, right? And I think the appetite for, or the potential, rather than the appetite is the word I want to use, the potential for that does exist, but it has to be directed, right? Energy, anger, potential. It can't just float around in the air. It needs to have a strategy, it needs to have a program, it needs to have a target. And that's what we're fighting for. That's what we'll be fighting for on Saturday. Connect Palestine with the interests of the working class and make it concrete is so important. And I think, at the moment, there's not enough people doing that.
Yes. So that's why we'll be there on Saturday protesting. So we implore all of our listeners to join us at the protest and go beyond that. Join the Revolutionary Communist Party. We're fighting for a world free of all wars, all imperialist bloodshed. And if you are sickened by what Keir Starmer is getting up to, if you have no faith in him changing his mind or growing a conscience, then this is the party for you. We'll see you again in 2 weeks' time.